My name is Patricia Anderson, though most people call me Trish. And at 65, I thought I had already lived through the hardest seasons of my life. Losing my husband, retirement, learning how to sleep on one side of the bed. But nothing prepared me for the Christmas Eve when my only son looked me in the eye and said the one sentence I never imagined coming from his mouth. I spent the day cooking the way I always do in December. The house smelled like roasted chicken, cinnamon, and the pine tree Ryan helped me pick out last week. I wrapped the keys to a car I had no business buying on my income, but he needed it. And that was enough for me. When he opened the box, he laughed, hugged me, told me I was unbelievable. For a moment, the house felt warm again, like when his father was still alive and we used to sit by the fireplace with Coco. Then his wife, Vanessa, shifted on the couch, smoothing her expensive blouse, giving him that tiny nod that changed everything. Ryan swallowed, the joy draining from his face, and said softly, "We didn't get you anything this year, Mom. Vanessa thinks you should learn to give without expecting anything back." My fingers went cold. My own son was repeating his wife's words like they belonged to him in my living room on Christmas Eve. I steadied my breath and looked at them, realizing something sharp and painful. If they believed they were here to teach me a lesson, they had no idea what I had been preparing for them all along. The truth is, the road to that Christmas Eve didn't begin with a car or a missing gift. It started months earlier, back in September, when the leaves were turning and the mornings were just beginning to carry that hint of cold. I remember waking early. The house quiet the way it always was now, and realizing I hadn't heard from Ryan in almost 2 weeks. No texts, no calls, not even one of those rushed, just checking in messages he used to send on his lunch break. He wasn't always like this. Growing up, Ryan was the kind of kid who called me from the grocery store because he forgot the name of the cereal his dad liked. When he got married, I told myself things would change, that it was normal for spouses to become each other's first priority. But the shift didn't feel natural. It felt sharpened, like a wedge being pushed between us. The first time I met Vanessa, she was polite enough, pretty, stylish. She worked at a boutique downtown and had a way of scanning a room like she was ranking everything in it. But Ryan seemed happy, and after losing my husband Bob 4 years earlier, I wanted more than anything for my son to have someone who loved him. As the months passed, small things began to stand out. Vanessa always commented on my house. At first, she did it like a compliment. "This place has so much potential." "Trish," she'd say, standing in my kitchen and looking around like she was inspecting a property listing. Then the tone changed. "You know, this house is far too big for you alone. Or you could live so much easier in a modern condo. Less work, less yard, less everything." One evening in early October, they came over for dinner. I made pasta and garlic bread. Simple enough. Ryan helped me set the table. Vanessa stayed on her phone, scrolling and sighing like the world owed her something. When we sat down, she brushed crumbs away from her sleeve with 2 fingers and said, "Have you ever thought about selling this place? You could help us with a down payment. It would benefit everyone." I tried to laugh it off, but the smile on my face felt glued on. "This house has paid off," I said gently. "Your father and I built a life here." Vanessa tilted her head, lips tightening. "But you're alone in it now. Just seems impractical." Ryan sat silent beside her, tapping his fork against his plate. That silence hurt more than her words. Later that night, as I washed dishes, I overheard their voices from the living room. Vanessa spoke in a low, urgent tone, the kind that wasn't meant to travel. "Your mom is being unreasonable. She's hoarding space she doesn't need. We're drowning in rent while she sits on a house like a dragon guarding gold." Ryan muttered something I couldn't hear, but Vanessa shot back. "She's your mother. You need to make her understand. We need that house, Ryan." Those words sank into me like ice. I knew many adult children leaned on their parents for help, but I had never imagined my son would be pushed to take something from me. Not like this. The days that followed were filled with small fractures. Ryan asked again about my plans for the house. He showed me listings for condos in senior communities, circled their prices, talked about opportunities and starting fresh. He didn't sound like himself. He sounded coached. Then there were the changes in Vanessa, new handbags, new shoes, a shimmering watch that cost more than my monthly electric bill. She said they were gifts from the store, but boutiques don't hand out $1,000 watches. The more I saw, the more a tight, uneasy knot formed in my stomach. It all came to a head one Saturday during a backyard cookout. Ryan helped me flip burgers. Vanessa stepped away to take a call, wandering to the far end of the yard. I didn't mean to listen, but her voice carried over the fence. "I told you I can't wear it around him," she whispered. "He'd start asking questions. Just give me time." Her tone wasn't playful. It was intimate, familiar, and the world tilted beneath my feet in a way I couldn't ignore. That evening after they left, I walked through my quiet house, touching the banister, the old photographs, the place at the dinner table where Ryan used to sit as a boy. Something was wrong. Something deep, something I had to confront. No matter how much it hurt to admit the possibility that my son's wife might not only be pressuring him, but betraying him. I didn't know it then. But that moment in the yard was the first step toward discovering just how far Vanessa was willing to go and how much I would have to do to stop her. And whether I liked it or not, I was about to learn the truth. I didn't sleep much after that cookout. I kept replaying Vanessa's voice, the softness of it, the kind you use with someone who knows you too well. I tried to reason with myself to find excuses for her, but the unease grew heavier each day. I needed answers, not suspicions. The person I turned to was Carol, my closest friend from church. She's the kind of woman who hears worry before you speak it. When I told her everything, Vanessa's attitude, the pressure about the house, the fancy gifts, and that conversation in my yard, Carol didn't dismiss any of it. She looked at me with the same calm she used when her daughter went through a messy divorce and said, "You need someone who can find the truth without getting emotional." She gave me a name, Mr. James Cooper, a retired police officer who now worked as a private investigator for small-town folks like us. Carol said he was discreet, fair, and didn't stir trouble unless trouble deserved stirring. His office was on the second floor of a narrow brick building downtown. The hallway smelled like old carpet and copy paper. When he opened the door, I saw a man in his early 60s with kind eyes and shoulders still held like a man trained to observe before speaking. He listened while I told him everything, my worries about the house, Vanessa's pressure on Ryan, her expensive new things, and the phone call. I tried not to let my voice shake, but even Cooper could see how much it hurt me just to say it out loud. He nodded thoughtfully and leaned back in his chair. "I can't promise you'll like what I find," he said gently. "But I can promise I'll find what's real." I handed him the deposit, feeling equal parts guilty and relieved. I wasn't proud of hiring someone to look into my daughter-in-law. But there comes a point in a parent's life when you stop worrying about being polite and start worrying about protecting the child you raised, even if they don't realize they need protecting. For a couple of weeks, life moved quietly. I cooked, cleaned. I went to church. I didn't breathe a word of what I had done. Ryan called less and less. Vanessa never called at all. But at night I lay awake, wondering what Cooper might be seeing. Then one Tuesday morning in late October he called. "Trish," he said, "we need to talk." My heart pounded as I drove to his office. When I walked in, he already had a file on the table. He waited until I sat before opening it. The first thing I saw was a photograph. Vanessa stepping out of a car I didn't recognize. Not Ryan's car, not her old sedan, a sleek SUV, spotless and new. Behind her, closing the driver's door with a familiarity that made my stomach turn, was a man I had never seen. "This is Brad Mitchell," Cooper said. "Sales manager at the new dealership off Route 9. He flipped to another photo. Vanessa and Brad walking into a hotel. Another leaving a restaurant. Another standing too close at a parking lot, her hand brushing his arm. I stared so long my eyes burned. Cooper spoke softly, giving me time to breathe. "There's more," he said, sliding receipts forward. Hotel check-ins paid with Brad's card. Restaurant bills for two signed by him. And the worst, a purchase order for a luxury watch delivered to Vanessa. The puzzle pieces clicked in a way that made me sick. "She's cheating," I whispered. Cooper didn't confirm, just tapped the papers. "She's living a second life, and it gets worse." He handed me a printed email. Found this in a trash bin behind her boutique. She must have printed it at work and tossed it. It was a message from Vanessa to Brad. The words blurred as I read them. She said Ryan would eventually convince me to sell the house. Cooper explained quietly. She wrote that once they got at least $150,000 out of it, she and Brad could finally have the life they deserved. The room tilted. I gripped the sides of my chair, trying to steady myself. Vanessa wasn't just betraying Ryan. She was planning to gut him financially, and she didn't care if the knife went through me first. Cooper placed a gentle hand on the table. I thought you should know before making any decisions. Decisions. The word echoed in my mind long after I drove home. I sat in my driveway, hands trembling on the steering wheel, staring at the house my husband and I built. The house where Ryan learned to ride his bike. The house I had hoped he would one day inherit with joy and gratitude. Now it was the center of someone else's scheme. That night I didn't cry. I felt something colder than grief, steadier than anger. It was resolve. If Vanessa wanted my home, my family, my son's future, she was about to learn that I hadn't lived 65 years on this earth without learning how to fight back. I didn't know how yet, but I knew where to start. The next morning I made an appointment with a lawyer. The law office sat on the corner of Main and Birch, a small brick building with a brass plaque that reads Anderson and Hartman, Family and Estate Law. I had passed it for years without thinking much about it. That morning, with the folder Cooper had given me tucked into my purse, it felt like the most important door I'd ever walked through. Ms. Catherine Walsh greeted me with a firm handshake and a calm smile. She was in her early 50s, composed and direct, the kind of woman who could balance empathy with strategy. I trusted her almost instantly. I told her everything about my husband's death, the house Bob and I worked for decades to pay off, Ryan's recent behavior, Vanessa's pressure, and finally the investigation. She didn't flinch when I mentioned the affair. She didn't gasp or widen her eyes when I explained Vanessa's plan. She simply listened, hands folded, absorbing every detail. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and exhaled slowly. "Trish," she said, "you've been carrying this alone for too long, but the good news is you're not powerless here." She explained my options in simple English, not legal jargon. The best path was a living trust that would protect the house while I was alive and set strict conditions for what happened after I was gone. I would remain in full control. No one, not Ryan, not Vanessa, not a future court, could force a sale while I lived. And after my passing, Ryan could inherit the house. But only if he met the conditions I set. "What kind of conditions?" I asked. "The ones that guard your wishes," she said gently. "For example, he must not have participated in any attempt to coerce you into selling. He must not be under financial obligation to a spouse or ex-spouse regarding the property. And he must never have tried to legally challenge your ownership." In other words, I could protect my home from Vanessa directly and protect Ryan from being manipulated by her in the future. I felt something unclench inside me for the first time in months. I signed the documents. Ms. Walsh notarized everything and made copies. When I walked out of that office, the late October wind felt sharper, cleaner. I had taken back control, but paperwork wasn't enough. I needed Ryan to see who Vanessa really was, and I needed to show him in a way that didn't make him defensive or push him further into her arms. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with Cooper's file spread before me. I read every line, every receipt, every photo. Each piece felt like another thread unraveling the life my son thought he had. I hated what I was about to do. Hated that it had come to this. But pretending everything was fine would only leave Ryan deeper in Vanessa's web. I made my decision. I would give them both a Christmas Eve they would never forget. I invited them to dinner the next morning. Vanessa replied within minutes, something she rarely did. "Looking forward to discussing the house," she wrote. Ryan sent a thumbs-up emoji, which stung more than it should have. Over the next weeks, I prepared the way someone prepares for a storm. I cooked, cleaned. I decorated the house. Even though the joy behind it felt strained, I bought Ryan the car he desperately needed, telling myself that a mother doesn't stop loving her child just because he's lost his way. But every time Vanessa walked into my home, her eyes drifted over the walls, the floors, the staircase, the kitchen counters. She wasn't admiring it. She was taking inventory. 2 days before Christmas, I walked into the dealership where Brad worked. I didn't confront him. I simply looked. He leaned on a desk, laughing with coworkers, adjusting his tie with the same hand that had held Vanessa in those photographs. He looked like a man who carried no guilt, no fear of consequences, a man who thought he'd never get caught. On Christmas Eve morning, I pulled out Cooper's file one last time. I placed the photographs, receipts, and the printed email into a large envelope. I added a small USB drive Cooper had prepared containing date-stamped videos from hotel lobbies. I held the envelope in my hands and whispered, "If this is what it takes to protect my son, then so be it." That evening, as the sun set behind the maple trees outside my window, I set the table with the good china. I placed candles, folded napkins, and laid out every dish I'd cooked from scratch. The house glowed warm despite the cold air outside. And as I heard their car pull into the driveway, I knew the storm had arrived. But I wasn't afraid. I was ready. When Ryan and Vanessa stepped into my house that Christmas Eve, the warmth from the fireplace couldn't soften the cold they brought with them. Vanessa walked in first, chin slightly lifted, her eyes sweeping the living room as if she was cataloging what would soon belong to her. Ryan followed with a nervous smile, the kind he used when he wanted the evening to go smoothly, but sensed it wouldn't. Dinner was quiet, too quiet. I had cooked everything from scratch. Roasted chicken, green beans, mashed potatoes, homemade rolls. I tried to recreate the holidays Ryan remembered as a boy, the ones filled with laughter and music. But Vanessa barely touched her food. She kept glancing at her phone as if waiting for a message from someone she actually wanted to spend the night with. Ryan talked about work, but even he seemed distracted, responding quickly whenever Vanessa whispered something into his ear. After dinner, we moved to the living room. The Christmas tree glowed softly in the corner. I handed Ryan the small velvet box containing the car keys. His face lit up instantly. He hugged me with genuine gratitude, the kind that made all the quiet pain of the last months blur for a moment. I wish the evening could have ended right there. Vanessa opened her gift next. I had saved 3 months to buy her that handbag, imagining she might see the gesture as a bridge between us. She held it up, snapped a photo for her followers, and set it aside without a word of appreciation. I noticed Ryan watching her as if waiting for some reaction that never came. Finally, I sat back, waiting for whatever gift they had brought. I wasn't expecting much, maybe a scented candle or a scarf, but I hoped for something that said, "You matter to us." Instead, Vanessa nudged Ryan. He cleared his throat, looked everywhere but at me and said, "We didn't get you anything this year, Mom. Vanessa thinks you need to learn to give without expecting anything back." The silence that followed was worse than shouting. I felt heat rise in my chest, but not from the fire. I saw Vanessa smirk just slightly, like she'd finally proven a point. I took a slow breath. "Is that so?" Ryan shrank a little. Vanessa crossed her legs and leaned back, victorious. They thought the humiliation ended there. But they didn't know that I had walked into this night armed with the truth. "Well," I said softly, reaching into the drawer beside me, "since we're doing lessons tonight, I have a gift of my own." I placed the large envelope on the coffee table. Vanessa's expression shifted instantly, tightening around the edges. Ryan frowned. "Go ahead," I said. "Open it." Vanessa grabbed it before Ryan could. The first photo slid out. Her face went pale. She stared at it for a full second before pushing it toward Ryan. He took it slowly. When he saw Vanessa stepping out of Brad's SUV with her hand brushing his arm, confusion crossed his face. "What is this?" he whispered. He shuffled to the next photo. Vanessa and Brad entering a hotel lobby. Another sharing a dinner too intimate to ignore. Another Vanessa leaning into Brad so closely it erased any thought of coincidence. Ryan shook his head like he could undo what he was seeing. "Vanessa, tell me these are fake." She stammered something about editing, manipulation, obsession on my part. I said nothing. I simply placed the printed email between them. Ryan picked it up. He read it slowly. His lips trembled as he reached the part where Vanessa described selling my house, splitting the money, and starting a new life with Brad. His shoulders slumped. The weight of betrayal settled onto him in real time. "Why?" he asked her, voice barely audible. "Why would you do this?" Vanessa's panic snapped into anger. "Because I deserve more than living off your ridiculous salary while your mother sits on a house she doesn't need." The cruelty of her words stunned even her. She clamped her mouth shut, but it was too late. Ryan stood, not quickly, but with a kind of slow devastation. "Get out," he said. Vanessa blinked. "Ryan, get out." His voice cracked, but the resolve in it was unshakable. Vanessa grabbed her coat, muttering threats about lawyers and rights, but none of it mattered anymore. The door slammed behind her, the echo slicing through the quiet house. Ryan sank onto the couch, his hands covering his face. I sat beside him, not touching him yet. Sometimes a mother waits until the breaking is done before the comforting can begin. After a moment that felt like forever, he whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry I let her twist things. I don't even know how I got here." I reached out and placed my hand on his back, gentle and steady. "You trusted someone you loved," I said. "There's no shame in that." He leaned into me, exhausted and grief-stricken. The fire crackled beside us, warm and constant. Outside, snow began to fall soft and slow, as if the world itself was exhaling. That night didn't give me joy, didn't even give me satisfaction. But it gave me something I needed more than either: the truth. And the truth, painful as it was the only gift worth opening that Christmas Eve.